Are you noticing changes in our country you find troubling? Do you feel unsafe and at a loss to remedy these fundamental shifts? Have you found the book Go Free by Jason Kuna? The Go Free method provides excellent meme curatives and specific language skills to overcome the anti-white psychological warfare being waged against us across the West. Go Free, a guide to aligning with the archetype of Western kind, by Jason Kuna, available on Amazon.
Our children are priceless, and we would do anything to protect them. So why aren't you using Go Free to protect them from the most harmful ideas? Decades in the making, Go Free is a simple yet brilliant practice designed to free us from destructive socio-political ideas. As words are the tools with which we think, Go Free promotes precise, simple, and targeted language to counteract psychological warfare. When you go free of the system's control over your word choice, you liberate your thinking. As you grow, you can empower others. And the most important thing you can do is inoculate our children against the ideas that are meant to harm them.
Welcome, Fire Spirit. Fire Spirit, how's it going?
Doing good today. Finally got my doorbell fixed. It's very strange when your doorbell doesn't work and you can't figure out why people aren't ringing your doorbell, and then you realize the doorbell's broken. So, anyway, I've got a new doorbell today.
Is that one of those battery powered, internet connected doorbells?
Nope, it's actually a regular old electrical switch doorbell, and it was just probably not properly installed, or one of the delivery people uh, hit it real hard or punched it with a sharp object or something, and it broke. The actual button itself was broken.
I'm so glad to hear that, because any type of fixture or thing in your house that comes with an app is a bad thing. Julia, how are things?
Well, it's been a mixed day. Um, so I wear a steel boned corset to help my back. And I don't think I've told the story, but interrupt me if I have. But and it's really, really important. Um, without this corset, I can walk around 15 minutes with my purse, or and I'm in so much pain I want to go back to my hotel. With my corset on, I can walk around with my purse and a bunch of shopping bags, or grocery bags. Oh God, I forgot to get cream. Darn. Um, and for many hours, and be in a very small amount of pain. So it makes a huge difference in my functionality. So on the second, which was like a few days after I got into the hotel, the grommets tore out from my corset. I went around to all the tailors in the area, and there was only one who said he thought he might be able to fix it. So I bought all the supplies because they don't have grommets. These types of alteration places don't carry grommets. I bought new grommets, and I even bought thread so that it would match properly, and new fabric, because basically because of these two grommets ripped out, and then there are like several more that were about to ripped out. So basically the entire section in the back of the corset, these two entire sections had to be replaced. And yeah, so this guy, it's a Turkish owned shop. Everyone there is working is Turkish. They never even took my phone number down. They gave me this like slip with their phone number on it. And they wrote like the date that I came in, the second of this month, and to the 13th. And but they said it would probably be ready like by the end of next week, and this was on a Friday. So I thought, okay, I'll call on Thursday. So I called on Thursday afternoon. They said, no, it's not ready. We haven't even started yet. And so I was like, so should I call like early next week? And she was like, yes. So I called then, and they're like, no, and it was clear they even had started yet. And then I called at the end of the week on Thursday or Friday again, and they were still hadn't started it. And so at that point, then next day was just walking down the street to get some lacing, because I was trying to make a crappy plastic corset from Amazon work for me. And I walked right past, and this is despite searching online for corset makers like in the area in Cologne. Um, Past a shop that had corsets. It was mostly a lingerie shop, but I saw corsets, and I walked in, and th- there was this Swiss German lady who's very based, by the way, and she's an expert corset maker. And she's like, "Oh God, you bring that to me. I'll fix that." And I also placed an order for a custom corset, because this one that I have, it's made to my measurements, but it's not like adjusted for my scoliosis. It doesn't look perfectly straight when I'm on, and it's just not perfect for me. And also, they only have limited colors, and there's just better reasons, many good reasons to get a corset where you can have fittings in person. And the corset maker that I use is in Bavaria. So uh, I brought her that corset. Um, let's see, it was on this Tuesday, right? And when I spoke to her today, she said she was already done with it. And I mean, of course, she is a corset maker, but still, she said it was going to take like a week, but she's done much faster. But then I was quite upset because at like 5:30, she closes at 6. She says, and she's not open on Mondays. Everything is closed on Sunday in Germany, except for like foods places. And it's like living Sundays in Germany are like Christmas in the US. Like everything worse, because like even like Christmas in the US, like there's sometimes like Whole Foods is open for like limited hours and stuff like that. No, everything is shut down except for gas stations and some restaurants. Um anyway, so uh she tells me, "Are you still coming?" Because I told her that I had gone home to get my new corset. I had actually ordered a new corset um, about 2 weeks before, maybe 10 days before the grommets tore out, um, which was fortuitous. And but they shipped it to my home address instead of shipping it to my hotel. So I had to go home to get that. And but I still really wanted my old one because it's molded perfectly to my body. Um, a new corset, it takes a while to break it in, and it's difficult to lace by myself. Um, it's because it just takes that break in time to really be able to lace it tightly, and I need it laced tightly in order for it to properly support me and relieve my pain. Um, anyway, so I said yes, I'm coming, and she didn't reply, but I hustled. But when I was almost there, I realized I'd forgotten the fabric, which I was bringing to see if there was suitable fabric for the new corset, the custom corset that she's making me. And so I had to run back to my hotel, get the fabric. Um, and then I get there, it's a minute before 6 p.m., and it's completely dark and locked up. And I was like, oh, I'm here in a minute before 6, and you're gone. And I was really surprised because when I um, was there earlier, uh, she knew that she knows I need that corset um, for my back. I I let her like rant for an hour about like the political situation in Germany to me. And of course I was interested in that, and I was glad to hear how base she was. Like, she's totally against like the jab, totally against like all the LGBT stuff. Hates the bureaucracy in Germany, like all the anti-white stuff. She is actually originally Swiss German, she thinks it's a little better in Switzerland, but she says it's still bad there. And I was made it obvious that I was in a little bit of pain. I needed to go look at fabric stores before they all closed. Um, and she just like kind of kept talking, and to be polite, I listened. And so I kind of thought we had a connection, and that she would wait 5 minutes for me. So that was kind of upsetting. I mean, I understand those, and it was clear when I told her like, um, that I was there a minute before 6. She was like, "Well, I'll see you on Tuesday." Uh, because I asked, could I, if you by any chance are able to um meet up so that I can get the fixed navy corset, that would be really great. And she does by appointments. Like, it says on her shop that not only does she open at these hours, limited hours, but also she does it by appointment. So I just, maybe she has a big weekend plan, and that's fine. And it's my fault that I wasn't there earlier. But then again, like, I was there before 6 p.m. And this is very German, by the way. Germans will like close their stores, but like half an hour. They start closing well before. And if like it's very off often has happened to me that if I go to a store and I'm there like 15 minutes before, they just won't let me in. Like, it's crazy. That Germans are very strict about the timing. So kind of a weird week where there's a mixture of anti-whiteism and then like Germans being too German. So I hope I haven't bored everyone with my rambling story.
No, not at all. In fact, I I mean, I don't want you to say anything personal, but that you have an accident, is that what led to the back problems?
So when I was 2 years old, I lost most of my left index finger in an accident. That led me to overuse the right side of my body. And I also had a fall when I was 4, right on my tailbone, and that threw my hips off. So when I entered my growth spurt, my pre-puberty growth spurt, I one of my legs grew an inch longer than the other, and so I had an unstable foundation for my spine. So that's why I developed the scoliosis. So it is kind of due to an accident, but it's a very severe case. Like, I've seen hundreds of doctors, and they're always like, "This is the worst case I've ever seen. I don't understand how you look like you're upright." Um, uh, I am at most 5'4" now, probably under. I'm like afraid to measure. I used to be 5'5", but if my spine were straight, I would be 5'10". So that's how much height I've lost.
I'm so it's I'm I don't know how to express that. I do feel empathy. Um my wife, she did ballet when she was young, and she also had quite a few problems with scoliosis. I I have a sort of an experience with a corset, because I walk my son up. I used to walk my son up to the bus stop every morning, and um, the one morning, what happened was, he was in the back of the bus, and the bus. I don't know what went wrong, but the bus driver drove full speed over the speed bump, and it launched my son into the air, and he came back on the edge of the seat on his back. And so we had to, my wife fetched him at school, and took him to hospital because he couldn't walk. And the x-ray showed that the disc was cracked right through. There was a crack right through the disc, one of the discs. And the doctor said, wait, we're not going to do anything now. We just need a corset, because he's so young. We need to see what happens in the next week. And my wife put it on the neighborhood watch group, and they were within an hour, 3 people in our neighborhood volunteered their corsets, because I didn't know people had this many back problems. But there was 3 white people with unused corsets in our neighborhood. I mean, in our immediate neighborhood. It was anyway. So we did get a corset for him, and the next week it was incredible, because they took another X-ray, and there was no sign of any damage. It healed in 1 week. Um, that disc. So yeah, that was couldn't believe that. I thought this was going to be, a long story. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Julia, for that. That very human story that we can all connect with. We all have some kind of a bicycle starts to get a beat, and and if you're a human, you don't realize you have a beat until someone tells you. You don't walk completely straight. And then, but I mean, so, but not. I mean, to live with something like that you have, I'm just so grateful every time I hear something like that. So today we are going to our man of the West, and this is this is the post that CKO was laughing so much about, because Captain Cook. I know something about him because my wife read a book, an autobiographical book, about James Cook. And then in this when Tommy Robinson invited these Maoris to do their little haka, I made a post mocking them. I I think it went something like, Captain Cook on the haka. Listen, lads, let's not hurt them. These barbarians think that war is still a contact sport. So load some small shot and hit that Tinkerbell in the red headdress. So that was my Captain Cook joke. And then I got the idea I must actually talk about him because he is one of those men of the West who did some things that pushed civilization forward in ways that most of us probably don't know about. But before I go on Captain Cook, I'm just going to do the intro. Welcome to the Saturday edition of the Shade Tree White Wellbeing NWG space. We hold this space every day at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on X. We are a no white guilt community that meets to practice the concepts and lexicon developed by Jason Kierner, Mr. No White Guilt himself. You can find him here on X as No White Guilt NWG. That's No White Guilt NWG on YouTube and elsewhere as simply No White Guilt, and on the web at nowhiteguilt.org. We discuss a wide variety of topics of interest to white people and look for ways to apply solutions. I'm Hans, your host. We ran pretty casual here, but I do ask that you raise your hand if you would like to jump in. Otherwise, I will call on speakers in turn for their thoughts. If you would like to jump into the conversation, just request a mic and we'll get you set up. We only ask that you comport yourself as much as possible to the Go Free lexicon and dialectic and act like a proper lady or gentleman of the West as applicable. Let's go. And I see we've got some new people in. Cordial, Jerome, Robert, Joel, welcome. We're talking about Captain Cook, Captain James Cook. So he's one of those men of the West who did some incredible things that most of us will probably not be able um, to trace his steps because he charted 1/3 of the world. He circumnavigated the world 3 times. It was one of those um, the the seafaring was a very brutal um, discipline at some point because mutiny usually ended up in a lot of dead people. So discipline was very strict. But Captain Cook was one of those people who, even though he was a peasant, he carried himself like a nobleman. And he managed to be both reasonable and a strict captain. If you read his autobiography, you'll see that this is a man who always tried to do the best for everyone, but if he had to, he could be very harsh in the way he maintained discipline. And on the open sea, in that time, it was a very dangerous place to be at that point and time because if everyone don't work together, people died. It was very rare for a voyage to not involve the death of sailors. So that's incredible in today's time to think about that, but that was what seafaring was. Scurvy was an unsolved problem, and this is a particular interest of James Cook. He that was something that interested him greatly. But let's start at his early life. He was an apprentice shop boy, and he slept in the shop. And after 18 months, he asked the owner to release him from his apprenticeship. And the owner knew a family in a port town. So James went to this family. He lived in their house as another child. And the family, the man enlisted him into the merchant navy school, where he learned algebra, geometry, trigonometry, navigation, and astronomy. He was on the first ship that he did, that he was a sailor on, was called Free Love. It was a coal ship. And by 21, he achieved the rank of able seaman. So um, later, he was a peasant. So the highest rank he could reasonably attain was master of the ship. He couldn't be an officer. Normally you wouldn't be an officer. Now, in the merchant navy, you could be a captain, but not in the Royal Navy. So he was offered the captaincy in the merchant fleet, but he decided to went into the Royal Navy instead, and they took a much lower rank. So in his Royal Navy, one of the first things that happened was they sailed. They hadn't, because there was a war with France, and they captured a French ship of the line. Now, Cook was a rank lower than master. He was master's mate at that point. And they captured this French ship of the line, and Cook had to sail it back to Britain. Now, this was quite kind of incredible for me, because he sailed it back to Britain for a bounty that was half his annual wage. It's crazy to think that you could, but you know, taking bounty was part of this whole. The reason this was the Navy's way of getting people to do this very dangerous job, because you had the opportunity to participate in bounty if you captured enemy ships. So in Britain, he was promoted to master, and on the HMS Pembroke, a 60-gun ship of the line, he went on a tour to Quebec. Now, this is where he first encountered scurvy. He didn't get scurvy, but there was quite a few of the sailors who died on the way to Quebec. In Quebec, they captured a French fort, and he met Lieutenant Holland, a Dutch surveyor, who showed him how he was a surveyor, but he demonstrated how his techniques can be used on a ship. So Cook, in the winter, because they had nothing to do, they couldn't make war in the winter, so they captured this fort, and then the whole winter they were in this fort. And Lieutenant Holland taught him cartographic trigonometry, and he learned to apply it on the ship. And using his knowledge, because in the summer they were going to go up the river and make war on the French in Quebec. So he created a one of the most, or he created the most detailed charts for that time, and one of them I put in the jumbotron. I just want to make sure it's there. Yes, so that is one of the charts that he created using this technique. It's far left of the jumbotron, that he created with this technique that he learned from Holland, from Lieutenant Holland. And this caught the Admiralty's attention when he sent this back to Britain. Anyway, he developed a combined marine and terrestrial cartographic technique, with which he created those charts. Now, back in London, so now his star is sort of rising, because the Admiralty noticed him, um, he has the highest rank a peasant can achieve, which is master of the ship. Um, and he did some experiments on scurvy because he didn't get scurvy, but he was into healthy living. So he started experimenting with fresh meat and vegetables, and he insisted that the crew would bathe and exercise while they are on the ship. Um, so he in London he married, or he met Elizabeth Batt, married her, got her pregnant, and then he's off to Newfoundland again. On the way there, he made a detailed observation of a solar eclipse, which caught the Royal Society's attention. So they arranged for him to make a scientific expedition to Tahiti, because the idea was in Tahiti, he could make a Venus observation, which they can then use to triangulate and compute the distance of the sun to the Earth. So there was this big voyage that was planned, um, because there were all kinds of scientific stuff that they wanted to do. Um, the Swedes Carl Linnaeus just published his method of taxonomy, and there was a rich biologist, Joseph Banks. He was going with them to Tahiti to catalog plants and animals. Now, Joseph Banks also brought artists with him so that they can make drawings of all the discoveries. So they went on this, and there was a secret mission to discover a landmass to the south and claim it for Britain. That was the secret mission. Um, but it was interesting to me that the Royal Society, the president of the Royal Society, James Douglas, he was the Earl of Morton. He was a humanitarian with a strict code of conduct. So if you're starting to get nervous about this, you would be, your instinct would be correct. Because my view of people back in time who identify as humanitarian, they fall into two groups. The one is the abstractionist group, and the other is just another form of anti-whiteism. Now this person is, it's sort of a mix. There's definitely some. Let me just read you some of the code of conduct and see if you recognize that. First point: exercise the utmost patience and forbearance with respect to the natives. Shedding the blood of natives is a crime of the highest order. They are the legal possessors of the several regions they inhabit. Point 4. No European has the right to occupy any part of their country or settle among them without their voluntary consent. Then 5. Respect the wishes for privacy of the natives. And then 6. Make lasting friendships and noting down names and customs. Now, it was interesting that they say they are legal possessors and that no European has the right to occupy. They just came from Quebec, where they occupied French Quebec for the crown. But they don't have the right to do the same for these non-white. So you can already see the anti-white narrative, how far back it goes. One thing that I definitely recognize is this idea that we have to exercise the utmost patience and forbearance with respect to the natives and their customs. We have to learn their customs. In South Africa, for instance, they would tell us that if we go into a meeting we are not we mustn't wait for them to speak. We must speak first, because, and this is now the anti-white narrative, non-whites or Black South Africans, um, it's a measure of respect if you speak first. But what I figured out is this is just a pretext, because they just don't know anything. They want to hear you say everything so that they can respond on that, because there's just nothing there. If they have to speak, they would go the whole time. But anyway, this is so much of this code of conduct I recognize uh, very well here in South Africa. But it was funny that they say no European has the right to occupy, but they just came from Quebec, where they occupied the French territory. Anyway, so the Endeavour sailed out of Plymouth Harbour with 93 souls on 25 August 1768. They used, so by this time, Cook, he used sauerkraut and malt effectively against scurvy. He was very focused on hygiene, and they used vinegar as cleaning agent, and this was long before the germ theory of sickness. Now the crew, they didn't believe in this stuff, but the sending crew were flogged if you were not maintaining the standards of hygiene. You got a serious beating. So Cook took this directive of the president to heart, and he always tried to avoid violence, and in some cases it even led to the death of some of his Marines. So he did his utmost best to not harm the natives. But what also came through in his writings is he dispelled this myth about the noble savage, because in his writings, there are common thread of theft, slave trade among the non-whites, territorial warfare, massacres, headhunting, and no one knew about these things because only white people wrote them down. And Cook was one of the first to write these things down. Now he discovered, of course, now if you look at the journeys that he went, he crisscrossed the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. He went to Cape Horn, and then he went to Tahiti, and then to Australia, to New Zealand, and then Australia, up to Jakarta. By the time he came to Jakarta, he's now on his way back. In the harbor, he writes a letter that he had no sailors. No sailors died up to that point. And then in the harbor, they caught malaria, and I think, let me see, it was about more than 20 of them, after they were for years at sea. They dock in the harbor, and more than 20 sailors die because of malaria. It must have been an incredible blow for Cook, who was proud that he could bring all his sailors safe back to civilization, sort of civilization, and then have 20 of them die in the harbor. Anyway, he made it back home, where he found that he's, now I think by that time he had 2 children. He wasn't present at the birth of any of his children, but he usually left his wife pregnant when he went on the next journey. So that was a huge success. It was something like 30,000 species that was documented in when they eventually got back to Britain. Um, then the Admiralty sent him for a second voyage. They still wanted because Cook didn't find the southern landmass. And one of the reasons was you couldn't just go south because it became very dangerous. All the drift ice, it became very dangerous. And there's incredible storms on the open sea. And that combined with drift ice is deadly for a wooden ship. So on the second voyage, they had two ships, but the ships got separated. It's another crisscross journey through the Pacific Ocean. Um, at some point, he went um, from the east side. Um, he charted North America, and by that time, the US was at war with Britain. And Benjamin Franklin gave instruction to the US captains, the captains of the US Navy, to leave Cook alone and not molest him because he, Benjamin Franklin was also a scientist. So he followed Cook, the communication and the news about Cook's journeys. And this was another one of those scientific journeys. So unfortunately, those Venus observations, they couldn't really do anything with them. But yes, Cook eventually he went back to Hawaii, and then um, what happened at Hawaii was um, they worshipped Cook as a god. Then Cook sailed away. There was a storm where a mast got damaged. He came back with a broken mast, and for some unexplained reason, the same non-whites who worshipped him as a god, when he came back, they murdered him. Um, and Cook was dismembered. He was and a couple of his Marines to the extent where um, his men could not recover his remains to be buried. So that was the end of Captain Cook. And what I forgot to mention was on the second trip, the Admiralty had a secret device. It was a very accurate chronometer, and this was used by Cook because with that very accurate timepiece, they could navigate a longitude. So now you could go, in the Pacific Ocean, you could navigate without landmarks because you can now determine longitude. And this was another big push forward with navigation on the open sea. Is longitude is a big problem to determine, and with this chronometer, Cook was able to accurately navigate on the open sea. So there's a lot of other stuff. Of course, um, when the news got back to Britain, his wife at that point she had two of the children died. His only daughter and one of his boys. So at that point she had three boys, and it was very sad because she survived all three of her boys. Two of them died in war at sea, and the other one of a fever. So just another lesson, that Western civilization didn't fall out of the sky. Here was Cook. They did the hard work to find out how scurvy worked, how to solve scurvy, how to solve longitude. All of this technology we just gave to everyone. We just gave it away with no thanks given, by the way. So yes, Cook, um, a man of principle. He was a peasant, but the nobility was inside him. He was you know, peasant and nobleman. It comes from inside. You get nobles who I mean, this rich character, he was a degenerate. Cook stayed faithful to his wife on all his journeys, but this rich scientist man, he was a degenerate. So he was a nobleman, but if you compare the two, there was no comparison between the two. So that's it for Captain Cook. He circumnavigated the world. 1/3 of the world was charted. I mean, you can see the quality of that map. He drew that. So very great man of the West. And I mean, we talk so much about, or so easily about these ocean voyages, but one of those voyages, they were 4 years on the ocean before they got back to Britain. 4 years on the ocean in a wooden boat with 90 other people. That's not, that's something that you need some discipline to pull that off. And I think on that journey they didn't lose a single sailor, which is unprecedented for that time. So that's it for Captain Cook. Julia.
So, as a Canadian and especially as an Australian, I'm pretty familiar with James Cook, although I did learn some new tidbits. So thank you for that, Hans. And Australians in particular are incredibly proud of Cook. Like, yeah, it's just one of those things where everything is named after him, and there's statues and busts, and um, hopefully they have not been white erased. But when I was visiting growing up, I was always very aware of him and of most of his accomplishments. He's quite talked about, or was in Australia. So that's really amazing. I was just looking at his astrological natal chart, and it is amazing how accurate it is for him. He's a Capricorn rising, and Capricorn risings. So that's one's rising sign is the essence of who one is, and Capricorns are incredibly disciplined. And his chart ruler, which is the ruler of Capricorn, is Saturn, and it's an Aquarius. So it's domiciled and dignified. So he has this dignified chart ruler. Saturn is all about discipline and exactitude, and yeah, it makes perfect sense that he would be an incredibly hard worker, and um, also healthy oriented is a very common thing. Uh, he also has this conjunction between his Venus and his um, Mercury, which can literally be interpreted as looking for Venus. So I think that's kind of funny. And then his MC, which is one of his angles and which represents sort of one's purpose in life, is in the 11th house, which is represents society. So literally, his purpose was to n- not just fame, which would be the 10th house, but to literally um, elevate society at large. Um, so, and his son is there as well. So he was very much a man who had a huge effect on the world, and was not just a celebrity, but a game changer for civilization. Um, and he was you. I can see that he would have very exalted principles because his Jupiter, which represents values, is exalted. So the most dignified placement possible. And that is also ruling his 12th house, where he has his which is his Mars, which represents ambition, and his Venus and Mercury. So those are all the 12th house is a weird place. It can, in my experience, it can either, it means like being taken away from yourself, but not due to your own actions. It's forces beyond your control, like kidnappings and things like that are 12th house events. So being taken away on the ocean is very, very fitting, especially as a profession. Um, Having his Mars representing his profession there in the 12th house. And the fact that he didn't get to see his wife very much makes, again, perfect sense, because his Venus is in the 12th house as well, which literally means either difficulty in marriage or just you don't get to see. But I see the one spouse very often. But the fact that the Mercury is conjunct likely means they had an active sex life, and explains the children. He also has a fifth house, which is the house of children, which is in Taurus, and that's a very fruitful sign. So they probably could have had a lot more children if they'd had more time together. Anyway, just I hope that's not too boring to people, but it's fascinating to me how accurate his chart is for him. Um, so fitting.
Julia, you are going to make me a believer if you keep this up, because one of his techniques, he had a lot of different quite innovative techniques to bend the non-white how can I put it, uncivilized, or people to his will. And one of the techniques was, if they stole something big, like a boat, he would go and capture the leader and hold the leader hostage until they bring back the stuff. um, yeah, so he could be quite a forceful character. So this is I didn't plan. Oh, by spirit.
Yeah, I was looking for something in this book that I recently read that I was mentioning before, that's called Blind Spots, and what you were talking about, scurvy, and um, according to this book, the first it was like a clinical trial, but it wasn't called a clinical trial back in those days, was by Dr. James Lind, and this was in the early 1700s. So he in 1738 he joined the Royal Navy, and was horrified about the scurvy, and so he did this test where he had 6 groups of the sailors. One was drinking 1.1 liters of cider. Number 2 group was drinking a mixture of alcohol and sulfuric acid. It doesn't sound too good. Number 3 was taking a swig of vinegar before each of 3 meals. Number 4 was drinking a half pint of seawater. Yuck. 5 was applying a medicinal paste of garlic, mustard seed, and dried radish seed. And number 6 was eating 2 oranges and 2 lemon every day. Well, I guess you can guess which one won the contest. And he figured out that it was the oranges and the lemons which would prevent the scurvy. And oddly enough, nobody paid any attention to him. So this goes back to the what I was saying before about how everything that Jason is doing keeps getting ignored by people because of cognitive dissonance. And there are folks who have an idea in their head about the way something is, and they absolutely will not change their mind, even though you have the brilliant answer to fix everything that everyone is complaining about. So I think you were saying Captain Cook was doing this, the same thing of figuring out what the scurvy was. He might have gotten the information from Dr. Lind and then applied it. But that was very unusual back in the day, that people would actually take up what, and it's still to this day, it's very unusual that people will take up the things that actually work. So I just wanted to mention that. And then also, I think that Captain Cook discovered and mapped the bays around in California here. I think uh, the I don't know if he did San Francisco Bay. I think he came in up in Marin County and was like in Tamales Bay and Bodega Bay area, if I remember from my schooling. But anyway, he's famous here in California too.
Yes, I saw during the BLM anti-white riots, they wanted to bring down the statue of Cook in Australia, and the police guarded the statue basically, so that they couldn't break it down. Yeah, because they call him now an evil colonizer, you know. But it's pathetic the way the Australians defend it, because they are, when they defend it, they just talk about you know, totally inside the anti-white narrative by saying how much he loved non-whites and all the things he did for them. It is, we are not at our best at the moment. So I didn't want to talk about this, but I think I have to just mention, because the story currently is, of course, the H-1B executive order that Trump made. So in certain cases, if you are a company and you hire H-1B, or you you get H-1Bs from India, for instance, you have to pay $100,000 every year to do that. Now, this article that I put in the Jumbotron, it's just to say it doesn't apply to Google and those big tech companies, because they use a different mechanism. And this article is just to say, well, that's great. That's great that Trump made that executive order, but actually we need to go further than that. But this was such good news, and I wonder if this is the big move that Trump wanted to do. Although the other one, the Antifa domestic terrorism, is of course another one. So I just wanted to say a few things about I think it's very good, the H-1B, even if it is not directly going to help with all the H-1Bs that are in big tech at the moment. Just the fact that it's in the conversation, that this kind of thing is happening now, I think people will feel freer. All the MAGA people will feel liberated to talk about this, to talk about the fact that it's not good that Indians are coming in to take jobs away from American citizens. Of course, we want it to go further, but according to the Go Free practice, if someone does something good for us, we must celebrate it. But there's also the other part of that, and this is what Jason said the other day. If something is incidentally good for white people, it doesn't help, because when it's taken away, because it was just incidentally white positive, no one is going to defend it if it's taken away. While if Trump now said this is good for white Americans, that would be a whole different story. Because then, if the next administration comes, let's say it's Vance, and Vance say we're dropping it, then that's going to cause trouble, because white people are going to perceive that as anti-white victimization that's targeted at them. But now, if Vance comes in and say, "Oh yes, remember that the H-1B thing, that's gone now," because we only incidentally benefited from it. And then the other thing I wanted to say about the Antifa domestic terrorism. Now, Trump made a post on Truth Social. I don't think there's anything official yet in the works. But that's another thing that's, even if he doesn't have teeth, is going to be very beneficial, because, well, let's say he does get it through, that there's a executive order or something like that. Then we can use the tactic that anti-whites also always use. We can, when there's an anti-white with Antifa connections, we can call them out as the domestic terrorist anti-white. You know, we can use their tactic, because they love it when one of ours was convicted in an anti-white trial. In some way, they will always refer to that person as the convicted fraudster, or the convicted felon, or the convicted that, and we can use that against them. But they are concrete things that are going to happen now, because most of the payment processors are American companies. So if there's some Antifa content creator in Sweden, people can report him and get his payment provider to to debank him. So there's going to be real good consequences for us if this goes through. So I love it. I love the fact that Antifa. Of course, what we would like to have happen is that Trump identifies Antifa as anti-white. But that's another thing. This is clearly in response to the Charlie Kirk assassination. And it makes our job somewhat easier, because to link Antifa with anti-whiteism is much easier than linking a trans person to anti-whiteism, because Antifa is explicitly anti-white most of the time. So it makes it easier for us to talk about Charlie Kirk's assassination as an anti-white assassination, which it is in more than one way. But the fact that Trump doesn't distinguish between Trantifa and Antifa, that it's all one thing, that's another good thing. I think. Any comments about the Antifa or the H-1B? I'm just loading the next thing. Biospirit.
Yeah, I'm very glad to see that at least something is being done about Antifa, because they've been just going full hog, doing whatever they want for forever. And I was seeing recently that they are also still tearing stuff up in Europe too. So they're a global terrorist organization as far as I'm concerned, and they've been given a pass by the anti-white regimes of the West. I don't know if people recall, but during the the Biden administration, if you typed in Antifa.com, it took you directly to the White House website. I kid you not. I don't know if it's still doing that, but that's what it was for all the years of the Biden administration. And there's a lot of stuff that the administration can do to put them out of business, just like they put the KKK out of business, just like they put any or the mafia, any organization that they want to have not exist. While they because of the way that our constitution is, they can't necessarily ban it, but they can use all sorts of laws to put them out of business, and that hasn't been done yet with Antifa. And it sounded to me like, from the what was being said in the news about it, is that they actually are going to investigate who is funding it and start prosecuting on that level. And that would be wonderful to see, because if the money dries up, then the activism will dry up. And so I was very, very I was hopeful about that. We'll see what happens. So often we get these news releases, everybody's hopes gets up, and then nothing happens. It was like they were saying, oh, they're gonna what's his name, that guy who's the senator, Shifty Shift. They were saying, oh, he's going to be indicted and arrested any minute, and he's going to jail and blah blah blah. Well, he's still sitting there, so that hasn't happened, has it? So I kind of reserve my full jubilation and judgment until they actually do something, not the saying of, oh, well, this might happen, or this could happen, or all of this maybe stuff. When we see actual arrests and we see actual prosecutions and things happening, then we'll know that it's a done deal. As far as the H-1B stuff, yeah, H-1B, that's great, but there are literally hundreds of different visa application letters and numbers, and they're all letting in these people legally and white erasing our country, and that has to stop. As far as I'm concerned, all I want to see is they are stopping all of them, every single program, every single thing, other than perhaps the tourist visas, and then those have to be monitored so that people don't just overstay them and stay here forever. I mean, they've found people who've been living here for 20 years who came in on a tourist visa and just never left. So there's plenty of stuff for them still to do that would be in the interests of white Americans, and I'm not seeing that yet. This whole thing of making it about money, and that, oh, we're going to charge them $100,000 for an application. Well, if somebody really wants to bring in someone, and then that someone gets in here and gets a green card and starts the process of becoming a U.S. citizen, then we still have on all of the books, they can still bring in their whole entire family. So once they're here, they can bring in their wife, they can bring in their kids, they can bring in their parents, they can bring in their siblings, and then all of them can bring in all of their family members. And so all it does is start to bring in like entire villages from the third world. And I just don't see that it's that great of a win, if you ask me. So that's my thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yes, I agree. In real terms, it's not going to affect big tech, because big tech uses another mechanism. This is what this post talks about. And this basically takes out competition, because this is for other firms that use this specific channel to bring them in. But what is going to be good is Maga people are now going to feel freer to talk about that, because this is something that their great leader is now doing. So, everything becomes open for discussion now. The social taboo is somewhat reduced, I think. Um, okay, I just have to yes, Julia. I just have to handle an emergency with my neighbor quickly. Julia, over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of obvious, but um, until politicians start talking about race, this stuff doesn't really make doesn't matter, right? Until they start saying changing the immigration laws, the quotas back to what they were, um, and saying, yeah, it's about race. White people can come um, in this many numbers, and only a tiny number of the very, very top, absolutely most talented um, non-whites can come in. And of course, then there also needs to be massive remigration, and that hasn't happened. There's all this money that's with a big beautiful bill that has been given to ICE, and ICE has been hiring, and they're not letting people in, but they're not really deporting very many, as far as I understand. Like, the numbers are quite small in terms of ho- people being deported. And I'm personally, and from what I've seen others post, there are easily 50 million who could be deported, who should be deported, maybe more like 100 million. Um, so, you know, a few hundreds here and there, even a couple thousand, that's a drop in the bucket. We need to see much bigger change. And again, it needs to be race based. We need to be all explicitly talking about this is a white country, and non-whites need to be um, r- remigrated, or even just make it so that they want to deport themselves. And this would be very easy to do. You just make it, you tax the hell out of them. So if you're non-white and you live in a white country, you are taxed at a very high rate. You're not allowed to send money home at all. Like, it's completely taxed if you send it home. Just all of it goes to the government. Um, and you make it so that they're not allowed to own property, so that they can't put roots down here. Um, you can do things like extra taxes or penalties if you have children here, so that they, again, don't start families here, and their children do not get citizenship if they're born here in our countries. And treat them, you know, not inhumanely, but do not treat them like white people. Treat them as other, because they are politically. Treat them as second class citizens. Uh, I mean, even you could even bring back segregation, and um, all the non-whites who are here, can't come in our spaces, and then also offer generous payment for remigration. And I bet you, if you did that, a lot of people would leave without any need for like enforcement. There are other ideas too. You could like deputize people if there's not enough ICE agents. I know I'm sure there are plenty of people of our good white men who'd be willing to um, remove illegals or bring illegals to an ICE detention center um, for free, or let alone or a small fee. So if there were the will, we could absolutely get this done um, very quickly, efficiently, with without even much money. Um, it all comes down to having the political will. So yeah, I mean, I guess it comes back to pushing back against anti-whiteism, using the lexicon and the dialectic, and pushing the Overton window further and further. And I think that's really all we can do at this point. We don't even have a single politician who is explicitly pro-white. If we had even a party, do we even have a party in any any white country that is explicitly pro-white? I think there's like some fringe ones, but what we really need is an explicitly pro-white political party, I think. Um, it might start out as fringe, but I think that would be a really good solution. I just don't know if it would ever be allowed to get anywhere until more anti-whiteism has been eroded.
I think just to have a party that's not playing the villain in the anti-white narrative and be explicitly white positive would go a long way to break the link between white well-being and the detriment of other groups, because that's an anti-white meme pathogen that's keeping the millions of white guilted from coming to our side. So even if that political party doesn't achieve anything, just to be there and saying this is a moral position, and challenging anyone to take you on that, which they won't do because they will lose that moral argument, is already a big thing. So and I think it probably has. I mean, the reason why um, something like patriotic alternative is easy to sideline is because they can be associated with these ugly things that so millions of white people are not going to defend them. But if you have a clean slate and none of that baggage, then your party will be much harder to ostracize and to isolate. Yes, I of course, we're just talking. It's much more difficult to go and actually do it. Those people are going to be targeted for sure. Um, but people all, I mean, Homeland Party, I think they are on that path. I saw a post today from Homeland Party who's explicitly called out anti-whiteism. Um, and I mean, they are registered, so it's happening. What's the? I had you. I forgot what the other one was. Um, okay, so I put another. I put the YouTube video where R4 and let me just make sure I've got the right one. But it's supposed to be the one with R4 and Hermes that went to this town close to Return to the Land. Yes, the streets of Harrison. Jason talked about this. They went to the streets of Harrison, which supposedly is known as the most quote unquote racist town in America. And they interviewed a couple of people. So I did compile just summary of how that video went. Jason did go the executive summary is that a big surprise, none of the people in the town identify as the anti-white slur. Um, Not a big surprise, of course. But it was interesting to you know, to get more detail of the specific demographics that they did interview. So, but before I do that, yesterday I talked about the man of the West was a Boer commander of a recon unit. But one of the things that I talked about was how strange it was when the Boers captured the one hill, the one mountain. um, some of the British soldiers were so indoctrinated that they jumped off a cliff to their deaths rather than be captured by the Boers. And this is, it sounds, you know, there must be more of the story there, because that's not a satisfactory explanation. So I did go into it a bit, and I just want to just give a summary of what happened there. Now, that was 1899. Now, 20 years before that, in 1897, oh, sorry, 79, the British, there were wars. The British army waged war against the Zulu, and particularly in this one battle, the Zulu defeated the British force. 1,300 British soldiers died, and all of the prisoners of war were executed by the Zulu, and they were executed by disembowelment. Now, it's interesting to read the Wikipedia. They try to soften it. They say, firstly, they don't talk about the white British that were disemboweled. They said the non-white collaborators were disemboweled because they were traitors. But of course, the white British were disemboweled as well. And then the other thing is, oh, it's not that bad, because the captives were beaten to death before they were disemboweled. So they weren't torturing them. This is how sick the anti-whites are, that they would twist the narrative to the maximum, because in the anti-white ideology, non-whites cannot be evil. It's only whites that can be evil. Anyway, so this was a context. Um, um, the British had a very good idea of these skin-clad savages and what they were doing. Um, there was no concept of a prisoner of war. If they captured a soldier, they not only executed him, they tortured the soldier by disembowelment. Um, when the anti-white media called the Boers skin-clad savages, they associated them in the minds of the British soldiers with these atrocities. So this was done on purpose. And if you have 20 years of this propaganda, then you can understand why British soldiers would jump to their death. And imagine the cognitive dissonance when the Boer general, um, Piet Joubert, when he came on the hill. Firstly, now you can also understand why that Scottish officer, Hector MacDonald, decided he's going to die with his sword in his hand. All his ammunition was spent. Then he pulled his sword and he charged the Boers, because in his mind, it's either die on your feet or die on your knees, being disemboweled. So the Boers managed to disarm him without harming him. And then when the General Joubert came because he was an old man. When he came on the hill after they captured it, after the young men captured the hill, he saw the sword and that it had the family crest, and he gave the sword back to the prisoner of war. I mean, where does that happen? That only happens with white people. He gave the soldier back his sword, even though he's a prisoner of war. And this is what honor is. And honor is a Western norm not shared with other races. Now, this now what was interesting to me is that this oh sorry, let me just get Biospirit's input. Biospirit.
I just wanted to mention that that has happened many times during many wars, and where the opposition has been so vilified that the men who are being captured think that they're going to certain death. That happened in World War II. I remember my dad saying that the propaganda was so overwhelming during World War II that saying that the Germans were just so awful and so brutal, and they were killing um, anyone who was being taken um, prisoner, and and then when they were being taken prisoner, they were so shocked at the how well they were treated, because the propaganda was completely different. And then the other thing I was thinking of was my dad was saying that people got so worked up by the propaganda that um, he remembers crowds of people. It's hard even for me to say this, that they had so demonized Germans that anyone who had a dachshund dog, people would were like kicking and killing little dachshund dogs to death, because they were associated with quote unquote the enemy. And this is what psychological propaganda does, and we all know here that anti-white psychological propaganda has been inflicted on all of us our entire lives, which is why so many of our people are completely batshit crazy. So just wanted to throw that out there because it came to mind when you were talking about that, how they were jumping off the cliffs. Yeah.
Well, this reminds me to a terrible story that I heard. My in-laws, they made friends with on their travels. They made friends with the people where my wife went to au pair in the Netherlands, and so they came to South Africa a couple of times. And when we visited them in the Netherlands, this man now, in context, this family is quite conservative by European standards, but that doesn't say much because they are heavily infected with anti-white meat pathogens like white guilt. So this man he has the rank of he has quite a high rank in the Netherlands, the military of the Netherlands. He was involved in a couple of UN operations. So he's telling us that is because there's a small island close to where they live in their town. And he's telling us that after the Germans surrendered, there were a German unit on the island, and then the Germans surrendered, and then the Dutch soldiers lined up the Germans who surrendered now, and they just killed them all. But the way he told it as if it was a good thing. And it was just incredible to me that here's this man, every life is precious to him, and his face is like, you know, those movies where Maria Magdalena sees Jesus Christ. You know, he's basking in the holy light when he's telling this story of these soldiers who surrendered and then they killed them all. It was there's a anti-whiteism is a deep psychosis. It severs the humanity of white people with the rest. We are something different. We are and it was just I didn't know about anti-whiteism at that time, but it, you know, you can see it. You can see it even though you don't have a name for it. You can see that severance. Um, and I hope I didn't derail myself now. Oh yes. Okay, so what I wanted to just talk about quickly was the Boers. So there was asymmetric anti-white psychological warfare that the Boers were not aware of. They were blissfully unaware that these British soldiers that came to their country, to their land, had 2 decades of vehemently anti-white propaganda. Um, so they were not prepared. They were not prepared for the British were not prepared for the Boers because the anti-white media lied to them with regards to the capabilities of the Boer forces. But the Boers were not prepared for the British because they were unaware of this asymmetric anti-white psychological warfare that was going on, because they didn't have an equivalent on their side. Um, of course, for them, the British were the villains because they were invading. They were the invading army, but that's how far it got. And then, but that all changed, and because that same dehumanization of white people that caused the British soldiers to jump to their death rather than be captured, that same dehumanization is what caused the 30,000 dead women and children in the camps. Um, and that is what so deeply shocked the the Boer republics, because you don't 30,000 women and children don't die because of an oopsie in the supply line. This is a much bigger problem. This is we are dealing with a demonic people here. Um, and this is what deeply shocked the Boers after the war. So that whole asymmetric psychological warfare flipped. And after the war, there was such a deep rift between the Afrikaans speaking um, Afrikaners and the English speaking whites in South Africa because of that. And this carried on for, I would say, 100 years, because every one of us here has a grandmother who still are not speaking with English speaking people. Um, and now, uh, 30,000 women and children dead. The total population were 400,000. So that's a significant chunk. And 80% of the dead were younger than 15. And that the implication of this statistic was that a, a, a child soldier, because some of the children went to war, a, a child soldier's survival were orders of magnitude higher than the children that stayed at home. And but also what was another cruel thing that the British did is the prisoners of war that were on the island of Ceylon. They were forced, because after the Boers surrendered, they were forced to swear allegiance to the Queen. Otherwise, they couldn't come back. And this is where that concept of fealty that we heard from when CKO talked about William Marshall, the medieval knight, the chivalric knight. Today we don't have really the concept of fealty, but there were a handful of prisoners of war that preferred life in prison to swearing fealty to the Queen. So, and it's hard to understand today. Why would you choose life in prison when you can just sign a paper? And um, this is this is they were different people. They were different people, and it wasn't that long ago. This was 1900. We're now in 2025. It's 125 years later. It's a completely different people because those people don't exist anymore. I don't know anyone like that. Um, but what I'm saying is this is a metaphor for what's happening to whites now and what happened with Charlie Kirk, because there's an asymmetric anti-white psychological warfare against whites. And what happened with Charlie Kirk is the curtain opened up for a fraction of a millimeter, and some of those monsters came through. And this completely shocked normal white people. It is that experience of this is a big problem. This isn't a problem of a few individuals. This is a big problem. And I think this is that shock of the world that I thought that I lived in is not the world that I live in. There are monsters among us, and I don't know how many of them there are, but much more than I thought. And I just wanted to bring that up because there's definitely there's an anti-white psychological warfare, and it's one-sided. Um, um, because there are no, I mean, the media is on one side, um, and our people now got a glimpse. They got a glimpse of that, and um, and I think that is where all this energy comes from. Now, now it's a bit disappointing because this is a big wave. And what is Trump doing? It's domestic terrorism for Antifa. It's not calling it anti-white, and it's the H-1B visa executive order. Also, um, it's good. It's good, but we need we need a lot more. So okay, so I'm the blue flame.
Yeah, hi guys. It's just something I've when I hear all of when I hear you guys talk about all of this, and there's just something that I can't shake off, and that is that what is it about our people? What is it about white folk that we are so sensitive to propaganda in that way? Yeah, that is an like a it's almost a morbid fascination because it is clearly uh yeah, you one can say as well as the brainwashing, it's the browbeating, it's the endless humiliations, it's the abuse of parents and what have you, and it all plays a very big role. But at the end of the day, it's like we're still, this the sheer susceptibility for this in and of itself I find quite alarming. Because, for example, Antifa, how long have they existed now? Isn't it near almost century, maybe even longer? And then, what were they named before? Like this is probably the latest mask, right? Um, yeah, and you know that there's gonna be those among them. They're gonna slip through the nets or whatever it's going to be. They're gonna rename themselves. They're gonna come back and continue their anti-white filth. We all know this. Still, good thing that it gets called out. I think though that there is, one of the reasons, I suppose, also why it always has to take so long, and it always seems to take lives. You know, that white folk, we are so passive. So many of us, let's say, who are so passive that it takes someone to get murdered and then to be laughed at before people actually act. That is like, there is a lot of exploration that is severely necessary there, I would say. Um, but I think what it also partially is, and hearing all the atrocities done to the Boers or to the Germans, and well, I mean, you could even include the opposite side of the World War with the Russians, the abominable treatment of the Russians and what have you, um, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, you name it, right? I think a big part of it also is that there is a certain understanding that for many is that when we have to start acknowledging that as a race, we acknowledge that we've been listening to the evildoers this entire time. Again, I can't say it enough collectively, right? We have been following the worst of the worst. The few heroes we've had, we allow them to be forgotten, we allow them to be disgraced, we allow their graves to be spat upon, uh, we allow our children to fall to harm in the most, in the darkest possible ways that one can inflict upon another, and so many ways. Just keep taking it, just keep sitting back, just keep you know watching it happen over and over and over, piles upon piles of victims. And yeah, I think one another aspect of all of this is also, once you start acknowledging anti-whiteism in the way how we want it to be, there's going to be a lot of people who not only will they be confronted with I have been living a lie, they will also be confronted with I stood by while this evil was happening right in my face. And then there is another additional part we're going to have to say or admit, is that they have been encouraging this. They have been applauding it. They've been getting in the way of people who were calling it out. And this can be, regular folks, as some people call it, fakes. They didn't really intend this harm to befall our children or what have you, but there was the consequence. Now you call the behavior that they've been exhibiting their entire lives passively, if you will, like kind of meekly going along. Um, yeah, now you're gonna confront them with the fact that they have been siding with evil all along, even if it's like slightly so, not intentionally. But that is a very hard truth to live with. Now we can hear always argues that for many of them there is a chance for them to redeem themselves. But again, you're asking for an enormously hard task in that. Something that for many of them, they don't have the years in life anymore to even make up for all the damage they indirectly have done or are still doing right now. And doubling down seems to be then the natural ego response to that. Um, because I guess another part of this is also how many can still, and here comes the real crux of it all. A big part of this stubborn resistance in accepting that anti-whiteism is a thing, and we have to stand up for white being is, I think many of them, they're not going to be able to live with themselves. They're going to, they never wanted anyone to come to harm, but the conclusion for some of them might be, it's like, oh yeah, little Jimmy got gang raped because of what this whichever individual was always back talking the family, was always telling them that they should just listen to the corrupt the corrupted in public office or whatever it's going to be. That's uh, that is something that's also been on my mind. So you have like these aspects of like facing in a certain sense, actually the real guilt, the actual guilt of participating in anti-whiteism, because that's the big hoodwink with anti-whites, right? They tell us to be guilty for the way we're born, but it's the anti-whites who should feel guilty for what they've done to us based on how we are born. And yeah, I think that is I think also in a lot of white negatives, it's almost it's probably largely the same thing, because many of them have been getting in the way of white well-being, and because of that, a lot of our people fell to harm who never needed to go on through any particular trauma, or even loss of life, loss of limb, whatever it is going to be. Uh, yeah, there is a lot of self-reflection that might come with that. That simply many will not be able to handle, or refuse to handle, or whatever it's going to be. And yeah. Now, yeah, that's just something I've been thinking about. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I, I seriously doubt that, to be honest. And that might be, I guess, the reason why I bring it up is it might be worth having that in, having it in mind, uh, in the coming weeks, months, years, what have you. And this is probably also why anti-whiteism isn't made illegal, but instead Antifa is made illegal, or whatever it's going to be, right? It's yeah, it's not to it's yeah, it always will give anti-whites a back door to slither out of, or at least a percentage of them will, and they just take advantage of that. I guess the real guilt that is secretly carried by many, and denied. Many deny themselves in that. And they'll never admit that they indirectly helped anti-whites or what have you. But at the same time, they are disgusted by it. They don't want it either. Once the moment comes, they recognize it. And I guess that's the danger of being a moral vague in that sense. It's like, this is the sort of things that you can get trapped into doing, even if it is indirectly. Uh, yeah. Anyways, those are just my thoughts on it as I was listening to everyone, and I'm not sure if it has any particular value, but that it seems to me as something that might be worth tossing in there, even if it's only for a moment. Uh, yeah, I guess I'll leave it here for now. I appreciate the time.
Okay, so the video that's in the Jobotron, I think it's far left. Yes, that's just Orful and Hermes. They went to interview a couple of white people in an, a nearby town, and it's interesting because this town is the best case for anyone who wants to focus negative attention on other groups. This is the best case. This is the town that has recently, I think the KKK had a chapter there or something. I didn't drill into that, but apparently that's the, so this is maximum conservative America. This is white America, the whitest, the most conservative, the most Republican town, and also the most heretical to anti-whiteism, if you translate what the slurs that they call them. So it is very interesting to see the real people that Hermes interviewed on the street. The first was a white woman. She looked like a mother. She looked like a normal, let's say, 40s, 40s mother. So the first question they ask is, of course, why is the town racist? And now the woman says she agrees that there has been racism. She hates that it's racist. It can seem so racist. So in other words, disavow that at all. Doesn't identify as the anti-white slur. Artful goes, she makes a comment about the billboard. Apparently, there was a billboard in the town that said "White Lives Matter," and then she made a negative comment, and then Artful prompted her, and he said, "Well, White Lives Matter is kind of positive." And then the woman agreed. She said, "Yes, definitely positive, but it's the underlying tone." And this is what, from the start, that Jason realized, is that because it's an inversion of Black Lives Matter, which in most people's eyes is a moral statement on its own, but because it's an inversion, the inversion will not be seen as moral. It will be seen as a snarky contradiction. And and this woman basically confirms that technically it's positive, but it's the underlying tone. And then she goes on, she says, because the KKK is so close, or used to be, which means it's probably not even anymore a thing there. Unfortunately, this area just has a bad reputation. So this is white guilt. It means she must now bend over backwards to villainy signal anti-whiteism to make up for what these white negatives did to their town. So that's another it's another condemnation of that tactic. Um, and then they ask her about, because every small town has this big billboard when you get into the town that says "Welcome to blah blah blah." Now, this town of theirs has a very multiracial cast of small children that welcomes you when you come in, and it doesn't reflect um, the population of the town at all. So they ask her about that, and she says, um, "Oh, she." The first thing she says about this, they ask her about the welcome sign, and she says, "Yes, that's a much better representation of Harrison." But then they prompt her, um, "But why put a sign up like that when the town is white?" So see where her mind went. It's a better representation of Harrison because it shows that we love black people. So she immediately went there because she has a lot of white guilt now, of course. But she makes a statement that's the opposite of the truth, because it's not at all a good representation of Harrison, because Harrison is all white. And it just shows you that that term representation is so loaded that people don't even detect um, the the conflict with reality. It's not at all about representation, because it's never a problem if whites go to zero. They would say, if that sign had all non-white children, they would still see it as a good representation. Um, but anyway, so they prompt her, why put the sign up like that when the town is white? Um, and what she says is, I don't know, I stay out of it. I wouldn't do that. So it's a positive statement from her that she wouldn't do that, but she cannot really defend her position. She just say, I don't want to talk about that. And then when they asked about the White Lives Matter, she immediately responded with all lives matter, which confirms that um, she it it's an inversion of Black Lives Matter. So all lives matter is still a revolutionary statement, because you will still be killed if you say that in certain parts of America. but it's an abstraction. You can hide behind an abstraction now, as long as you don't explicitly signal that you care about white people, then you can get away. Now, the next person is an old white man, but he's not super old. He's sort of 50 plus, overweight. He seems like typical management type person, business owner, small business owner maybe. On the question of racist, he says it's not true, and I have no idea why they call it, why they call us that. Don't believe the media. This is a great town to live in. So once again, you see, no one wants to identify as the villain in the anti-white narrative, at least not in public, which it is if someone has a camera on you. Then he says, we it doesn't happen in his town. The racism doesn't happen there. We have a diverse group at our college. In other words, he's villainy signaling anti-whiteism by saying that white erasure is a good thing. And then he said they've never had issues in town. In other words, when non-whites come into the town, everyone bends over backwards and to show obeisance to these angelized people. Now, I think it's artful that asked him, now, if the town was racist, would it be bad? And then he goes, no, it would be bad because we should accept people as they are. And then they ask him, what do you think about the all-white community that's close to your town? He says, I don't have an opinion on that. And then he asks, what if blacks want their own community? And then he answers, absolutely. So he's totally fine with the all black community, but an all white community doesn't have an opinion on that, which is just, he's responding to the social morality of anti whiteism. It would be immoral to think that that's a good thing. Then the next woman is a younger woman. She has short hair. She's 30, 30 something, short hair. So you can already see where this is going. Ask her if it's racist. Harrison, it's totally not. I work with all races. They're wonderful people. We get a very bad rap for very opinionated people that aren't from here and don't see the camaraderie that we have. So she's villainy signaling that all the quote unquote races are from out of town. Now they ask her, what about an all white town on private land? Should it be allowed? Now she says, very hard to answer. There are people from all religions and they have their own sects. It's controversial, hard to answer, cannot answer. Then they ask, should blacks have their own communities? And she says, that's a weird question to answer. Not a hard question, it's a weird question to answer. They ask her about the White Lives Matter signs. She says, I ignore it, I don't believe in that. They ask about white pride, and she says, depends on how you portray that. I don't believe in it. We intermingle pretty well. So she associates white pride directly with wanting to harm other groups. Otherwise, you wouldn't say, as a counterpoint, that we intermingle. Because white pride is independent from whether you want segregation or not. But she immediately connects it together. Then they ask her, where's the most racist town? Because apparently Harrison is not it. And all she says is, it's not us. And then the next one is an orbicular woman, a fairly large woman, older than both of the other ones. She's 50 plus. They ask her about racist. She says, yes, the town is, but it, oh no, she says, yes, she knows about it, but the town doesn't, she knows about the reputation, but the town doesn't deserve the reputation. Once again, disavowal. Um, the KKK moved over here, but she hasn't seen any discrimination. The White Lives Matter billboard, she says, it's fine as long as they pay for it. So clearly, this woman is um, white sympathetic. Um, they ask her about what about an all white community. She just says it's their land; they can do what they want. So, in other words, she's fine with it. She just doesn't know how to defend it. Then, lastly, a very old man. He must be 70 plus. So they ask him about. So I mean, this is the best chance they've got. The 70-year-old. Um, he says about the reputation. He says no town deserves that reputation. I get along with everybody. Then they ask, and then he says, years ago, when I was 10 years old, there was a shooting in the square, and he says the law was very tough at that time. So the implication is, of course, that there was some incident, some non-white harmed someone, and the police came and put him down like a dog. Um, which is not happening these days, which is why you get an anti-white monster plunging a knife into one of our daughters of the West. It's because they stopped doing that the old man said the law was very tough. We stopped having a tough law, and now our daughters of the West walk around like prey. They ask him about White Lives Matter. He says, all lives matter. Can you believe it? This old man saying the same mantra. It's like they pay attention. They pay attention if the anti-white media is talking. Everyone needs pride, he says. Now they ask him about the white community. I don't think it will work. People are moving in. It's not the same town. So can you hear? Can you hear? People are moving in. It's not the same town. He's talking about white erasure. Now, and he continues, some ways for the best, some for the worst. Now he, and then he says, um, they prompt him, okay, so what's good and what's bad? Because he says there are good and bad things about white erasure. So he says, bad is racist people, good is the businesses. In other words, for him, the bad is the white people who object to it. And what's good is the new businesses that came up with all the non-whites that came with the non-whites. Totally destroyed. Has no way to defend. Um, will never go to bat for the anti-non-whites. So this is a total loss for their strategy. Total loss. But I mean, good on Hermes for actually publishing this video. So that I have hopes for that young man. He seems to be a principled man. And last time, one of the interviews I saw, he was quite perplexed at the way the Fuentes community operates, because he was complaining that he had some minor disagreement, and then they piled on him like a bunch of rabbit squirrels. But that was an interesting video, um, and of course totally invalidates. It totally invalidates any other strategy than the one that we have, which is we focus on white well-being and none of this ugly stuff. You're not going to rehabilitate the villains of the past. You're not going to redefine the anti-white lexicon. You're not going to um, identify as the villain in their narrative. Anti-whites are not anti-whites win because they never do that. They never identify as anti-white. Never. Well, I've seen it once or twice, very stupid people with 3 or 4 followers on X. They will do that. But the main, the successful, the ones that you see, the content creators, anti-white media, they never identify as the villain in our story. They make us identify as the villain in the anti-white narrative because they like winning. And the people in the white sympathetic sphere, they don't like winning. It's either that or they are paid to lose. So the next one that I want to put in, just give me a minute. Wait, I'm not going to put the videos of the other ones because they are the discussion. It's quite short. So let me just talk about. There was after the Charlie Kirk TikTok videos, there was a general, I would say, the white sympathetic sphere. There is general despondency, hopelessness, despair that you can detect in the way people talk about solutions. I listened to Ramsey Paul. He had a round table, and I listened to a couple of his audience members. One of them, let me just get my notes. I'm jumping around a bit. One of them, yes. So one of them, his name or his handle is Digitus. Digitus. He's in Australia. He's fairly old, and he's just you know he's very despondent. He's lugubrious. He's and he just has no hope. And then he said, well, actually, I'm not that worried because I'm not going to be around in 20 years. And then he says, well, okay, I have family members, but what can I do? Um, so incredible that, this is the lack of peoplehood. The fact that you think because you're going to die soon, so what does it matter? It's an absolute severance again, severance between you and your people. There is no people there. It's just this individual, and the only thought that he has, even his family members, is some kind of side effect. It's not, and I had the impression that he lives alone. So severed from his family, severed from his people, just an individual waiting to die, with no purpose in life, no hope to turn this around. Um, and then he gets on this stream and he spreads the poison that's in him. He spreads it around so we can all share. Um, then one of the other ones, he just talks about the double standards. They do see that there are hush crimes. They don't use the term hush crime, of course, but yes, there are a lot of double standards, crime going mainstream, and there's definitely there's a very feminized um, facet of anti-whiteism where they cannot see that consequences for crime is the thing that prevents the crime. They think social um, treating mental health is the thing that fixes the crime. It's kind of strange for me that they cannot see that if someone commits a murder and you put the murderer in the ground, that another murderer is going to hesitate. It, it I mean, I don't. maybe this is the thing, because I was spanked when I in fact I was caned in school. I and the only time that I got a caning was from a female teacher, because in my little male brain I thought, okay, I know these male teachers, I can't push my luck with them, but this my English teacher was a female, and I thought, well, I'll push my luck with her, so I'm not going to do my homework. And then the Monday morning, after I spent the whole weekend hunting birds in the veld, came Monday morning, my work wasn't done. She gives me a small piece of paper with a number 2, and I need to go to the principal with this number 2. And the number 2 means, you know, two shots with a cane. And from then on, I never did that again. My English homework was done before all other homework. But there was a very strong connection between um, between what you did wrong and the consequences. And maybe that's why people don't understand it, because they grew up without consequences. There never was consequences. There never were consequences. So, but this is a very feminized anti-white thing. This thing that um, when a criminal commits a crime, you're not worried about other criminals, how they see it, and about other victims. You are worried about the criminal self. And if we can only make the criminals better, then we can kumbaya together, and no one will be angry, and everyone is, happy. And this is just people. I mean, even a child doesn't think like that. So, but Ramsey Paul commented about that the focus is on treating the mental health instead of consequences for these people, and this incentivizes crime, of course, repeat offenses. Then another user, 009, he just comments that Europeans are unaware of the threat. I think the Europeans are very much aware of the threat. Um, And then Sasha, when they talked about Irina, she comes in with, she can understand why no one helps her, because she would be scared to help. Well, yeah, but then you didn't watch the video, did you? Because it's not that they didn't help, it's that they wasn't in the least bit concerned about her health. They didn't call 911. The one kept on his telephone. He kept his conversation going. The other one um, um, made a video of the blood running, from under the seat. So yeah, totally blind to what's going on there. And what's going on there is they don't give a damn about a white girl's life. In fact, I would go further and say this is a bonus to the way they acted. They were not at all concerned, which means that this is a good thing. Blue frame.
Something that is worth knowing when it comes to females who spare, let's say, criminal minds. Um, there is the type of female who are sparing criminals so that they have someone be around in society that looks angelic, that they can look in comparison to as angelic. Very common example of this is these females who deliberately look for broken males to marry with, or at the very least live with. They then get beaten to a pulp by these broken males, and then afterwards they can toss a pity party that is it is kind of a form of that Munchausen by proxy in a way, I suspect. I'm not 100% on that, but it is very comparable because it again comes. The whole purpose of the exercise, so to say, is that um, that naturally, if they get beaten up, it is the big bad guy who's at fault, and then they can get social brownie points, or they can get pity points from society. It's basically more or less what it comes down to. Like when it comes to criminals being spared, uh, never underestimate that there might be that type of tactics behind it. Um, because we all know also is that a lot of anti-whites, they're all about looking good, right? And what is the easiest way? Well, if you have someone else to point at for being bad, and especially with these anti-whites who focus on gender conflict, if they can stir the pot this way some more, well, all the better, because we understand that they have created now organizations um, to be partners in crime with, in a way, or like maybe that's not the best way to put it, like henchmen, I suppose. So yeah, because a healthy, like, at least, I mean, maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but uh, the idea that it is the average for a woman to just want to kumbaya with criminals is like, no, that's the behavior of someone who's messed up in the head some way, was like low morals or what have you, and definitely feminized minds. um but again, the key word is feminized, not female. Meaning, it can be a male, it can be a female who does these sorts of tricks. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in there because yeah, it does happen, and it is somewhat cataloged already. Yeah, but yeah, please continue. I just wanted to toss that in there.
Okay, I had some tech issues. I hope I'm still um, still online. Can anyone just give me a thumbs up? Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so the next one is, I'm just going to quickly comment. There was another stream of another content creator where they discussed solutions, and also another a very despondent, very um, it's a morgue basically. So the um, conclusion is, we have no cohesive society anymore. No one can come together on anything. No shared values, no shared religion. We're white, but people even dispute that. We're in for a very long drawn out Brazilification of America. So this is a misconception, because anti-whiteism is not going to slow down. It's going to accelerate. So there's not going to be, in my mind, a long drawn out Brazilification. It's when it tips over, it's going to be the event horizon. So um, um, it's we hopefully we never see that. We can never get there. The best you can do is to consolidate in little pockets with other white people and try to ride out the storm, knowing that inevitably you'll be a minority. Try to create local power, hopefully populate areas enough to withstand the tyranny of the Browns once they are fully in charge. Another misconception, and that is that anti-whites are not going to let you live in your little enclave, because that's a fundamental misconception of anti-whiteism, the nature of anti-whiteism. Anti-whiteism is not about benefiting non-whites. It's about harming white people. As long as they are somewhere on planet Earth, there are white children happily playing in the street, anti-whites are going to find a reason to go and find them. So this idea that you're going to create your little enclave and it's going to be live and let live, that's absolutely not the case. And Urania is an example of that. Urania is not going to survive long term. Urania is going to be at some point be taken over, and even if they have to kill them, because this is the only reason why Urania is allowed to survive is because there are still white people in power in the West. But when the West gets white erased, the gloves will come off. And this is what people don't understand. They think they will be able to go and have their little backpack and their little AR-15 and in their bunker, and they're going to be fine. No, no one's going to be fine. Then he says, we're not going to take power back. We're not going to secretly infiltrate the institutions and form some kind of a gay multiracial alliance to regain power for the white man. It's stupid. The best we can hope for is that some of these European nations turn things around. But that's not looking great either. Every forum asking for immigration is Tommy flavored with the multiracial coalition against Islam, which is true. So there is no real movement that names white people as the victimized, which is true. So all of that is to say they don't have a solution. This community recognizes that they don't have a solution because there's words like we're going to try and do this. This may happen. There's no agency. It's all on. Well, the chips have fallen, and we're just waiting for the decision of where we sit in this whole thing. But given that they don't have a solution, they have no trouble attacking our solution. While you should never do that. You only attack a solution if you have a better one. Otherwise, you should shut up. And this is not what's happening here. So now I go on to so this is an interview that Hermes had with Steve Laws. I like both of these young men. They are definitely on the right track. But also there's some of that despair that comes through in this interview. um, so Steve Laws starts with saying that youngsters are radical because there's no future for them. School tells us everyone is the same, which is totally false. I can't believe that white people are still saying that today. The school doesn't tell us that everyone is the same. The school tells us that white people are evil. That's the problem. It's that equality is not, it doesn't mean what it technically should mean. It means equality for everyone except for white people. Anyway, so Steve Laws goes on, he says, most normal people can see that they hate us. And we're not going to waste time trying to work with those who don't see that. This is another error because there's a vast amount of white people who don't see that. Now, the Charlie Kirk situation changed a lot of that. I must say, I don't know what scope that change is. What's the scope of those changes? But I think that sent a shockwave. But that shockwave is probably limited to the X audience. It's probably limited to the X audience. I hope not. But it's a grave error to say I'm not going to waste time to those who don't already are on the same page as me, because this is the whole struggle, is to get those people on our page. So he's given up on white people when he says that. Then he says, he starts with the stages of remigration, which is obvious. This is what Trump tried to do: illegals first, and then legal. And anyway, but the whole problem with this is you're getting into specifics before you have power to enact any of them. So now you open yourself up to attacks from anti-whites for things that you don't have the power to do anyway. So all it can be used for is to nuke you, to turn white people away from your movement. Then he says, how did we get to white guilt? And he talks about propaganda that trickles through. It creates a culture that anyone who steps outside of that, what is seen as radical, racist, extremist, um, and then people say to themselves, I cannot say that. And it gets to a point, and then he says this goes on until there's a point where everyone rejects that, whether it's true or not, which is not the case. The people who say, I'm going to be racist now, first of all, those people don't say that at work if they still have a job. No one is doing that. And they only say that on anonymous forums. They're not going to say that in the street when the camera is on them. So this is a misconception. They live in a dream world if they think that all of their own party members, none of them will say that at work. Only the ones who are full-time employed by the party. And then he says, in terms of how do you change everyone's mindset? And listen to his answer. Because the question Hermes asks, how do we change everyone's mindset? He says, if I had that answer, it would already be fixed. No, we have the answer, but fixing it is a hard problem. We need to get to those people and get the message out. Just delivering the message is hard because we are kept away from them. We are in a soundproof room. Then he talks about, and this is where you can see how their tactic just totally misfires, because now he starts to talk about mixed kids. What must happen with mixed kids? And his answer is, of course, total deportation, which will just, oh no, his answer is even worse. His answer is, okay, I would like to deport them, but I know that would be a non-starter. So let's keep the mixed kids here until we have power, and then we ship them out, which is even worse answer, because now he's dishonest and he has so yes, this is the worst answer possible. Now he goes into differences. He says, it's not only skin, it's behavior, it's IQ, eye color, bone structure. Um, um, they tell us that we hate him because he's black. And he says, technically that's true, but it's not because of the color, it's because of the content. So he's totally taking on he's playing the villain now. Um, he's saying that he hates other people for their birth. Um, and I don't think that's really what he believes. I think that's he decided to take that position because for him the alternative would be to bend over and open his arms to white erasure. Um, then he says, if you're in the UK, you have to deal with tribal dances, eating rice in the street, telling us to apologize for our past. And then he says, no, we're not going to do that. We're proud of our past and we'll do it again. So this is once again where he takes ownership of the wrongs that whites did in the past, instead of saying that's other people that did that. You can't collectively guilt me for things that I did not do. Instead, he takes it on. um, then he throws us all under the bus. He says every race has its own continent. In other words, America, I give America to the Amerindians. I give South Africa to the blacks. I give Australia to the Aborigines. Um, as long as I can have Britain. This is selfish individualism. And so, yeah, we don't need that. And then he says, then Hermes asked him, so is this just a natural mixing together of everyone? And he says, no, it's forced, which is correct. White erasure is totally not natural. If you leave people, they will segregate into their communities because we like people like us because we project the same norms. We create the same civilization. We like our environment to reflect our internal expression back at us. So obvious. So that's true. He got that one right. And then the question comes, okay, so what now? And the answer is, well, talk with people in real life, which is true. At work, which is true. Protests, yes. Activism, yes. Support politicians calling for deportation, even if you disagree with them in other ways, which is totally yes. So there's full marks for those answers. But talk with people is not enough. You need to talk the right things. you know that it's all in the message. It's not only talk nonsense to them, because the way he's going to talk is going to be harmful. So it's a big difference between what you're talking. So that was Steve Laws. I'm going to move on because there's quite similarities between what Steve Laws said and what Mark Collett's community also said. So this is also, that community is really, really despondent. They don't see a solution. Mark Collett had an interview with a man that goes by Ferryman. He's in Canada, and according to this guy, the way to go is the Tom Sewell model, where they create mirror groups for all the anti-white institutions, which is civil advocacy, research institutions, media outlets. So create your own versions of those things, because his argument is anti-whites will come out with an article. This article will be backed by research, but it's all anti-white institutions. So if we create the same thing, we can have the illusion of authority if we have all these institutions. Totally not going to work, because it matters in what social morality you are operating in. All the authority in the world will not work if you contradict the morality of the person that you're talking to. I don't care. Think for yourself. If someone comes to you and mathematically proves that the earth is better off without white people, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not interested in a future without white people. So your proof means nothing to me. So of course, authority means nothing if your morality is not correct. Anyway, then So they identify one of the problems is that conservative people are not racialized, which is true. Conservative people will defend abstractions because, of course, the anti-white morality. It's you are allowed to name white people, but not in a good context. You are allowed to name white people when you're talking about the evil whites did. You're not allowed to name white people when they are victimized. You're not allowed to name white people when you care about their well-being. So it's important to distinguish by racialized, because it's absolutely racialized when I'm talking about who must be victimized. They have no shame in pointing out that a criminal was white and that we need to do something about white supremacy or white this or white that. So it's falling into the abstraction there, which you almost always do when you use a term like the race or racialized, because that term is an abstraction. And then they say, oh, this was interesting. The problem, can you believe, according to Mark Collett and the ferryman, the big problem is we don't have enough diversity. Now, you might think, well, okay, I think there's a misunderstanding here. But listen to the argument. Trying to convince those white people to join highly radicalized, racialized group is hard if there's not enough diversity, because they need the diversity to be able to see how bad other races are, so that they can become radicalized and racialized. This is how they think. The white kid in a white erased school is easier to reach. Well, it's easier to reach if your tactic is to slander other races. But our method works um, just as well in either case. Um, then they start to talk about you have to experience white erasure. I'm using the term white erasure. They of course don't use that, but I'm just translating. They use the anti-white term, so I'm just going to translate. You have to experience white erasure to know how toxic it is, and by the time you realize it's toxic, it's too late. So this is the dilemma that they realize in their own tactic. By the time that the people start to notice there's a problem, it's too late, because now they are white erased, so they can no longer get power. BNP went to an all white area, and all the white people said it's not that bad. Then, when that area became white erased, BNP, the message was received, but it meant nothing anymore because there were too few white people. And this is inherent in the tactic or the strategy of villainizing other groups. So it's a failed strategy before you even start. So what's their solution? Given that they have this crutch, this amputated strategy that cannot work in a healthy society. Okay, so their solution is you take the best white people from these white erased areas. So this is now 10% white. You go to Birmingham and you get those white people out. And they experienced white erasure, so they don't want that. So you, all those people, you get them to an all white area, and then you make sure that area doesn't become white erased. And then you do what non-whites did. You cluster in your own areas, have your own shops, religious institutions. This is now a big gap between um, the neighborhood is white erased, and then you just make all these things happen. So there's a big gap there. How's that going to happen? Which isn't filled in. And the reason why it's not filled in, they don't really believe it's going to happen. This is where their despair sets in. We cannot live in white erased area where everyone is racially aware, but we'll never have power there. In the UK, people can buy homes in the same area. So they're talking now that when these people get aware that there's a problem, and that these other races are all bad, because they accept this white negative propaganda, then they can buy homes in the same area. This is totally, the anti-white regime is all the time in South Africa, is figuring out where the white people are, and then they're disrupting the white neighborhoods by putting in low income housing. In Sandton, which is a business area that's very expensive, they put one block out there and then put um, low income housing there. This is how easy it is for the regime to do. there's no there's no you have to address the core issue, which is the psychology inside the people. You don't need them. Of course, people are going to white flight to where it's safer, but that's not your grand strategy. Then he goes on and says, whites can win because they will have the biggest. Oh, this is the other thing that he says. He says, even so, Britain is going to be minority white. But that's not a crisis because the whites are going to be the biggest minority. Okay? So here's how Mark Collett hopes it will play out. Okay, white erasure will continue until whites are the minority. Non-whites will have conflict between themselves, Muslims and Sikhs and things. And they can win that conflict because they are the biggest, whites are the biggest minority. And the anti-white regime is not going to participate because the anti-white regime is going to collapse because the whites will no longer be able to pay for everything. Once again, the anti-white regime is going to manage the decline. They're going to just tax more, tax more. This is what's happening in South Africa. Non-whites get free electricity. They get free this, free that. I have an item on my municipal account for grant. Okay. My grant is 0. But there's no insight that I have as to who gets the grant. It's just invisible. But I can tell you the non-whites get a grant. In other words, they pay nothing. We pay for them because they will have let's say 3,000 rand a month, and then they will get a 3,000 rand grant or a 2,000 rand grant, and it comes out of our pocket. So they know how to work this. Um, so and I think those people that talk about these strategies, this is wishful thinking. The despair in their voices comes from the fact that they realize this is going nowhere. And then what he says is, okay, so what's going to happen? The anti-white regime is going to collapse, which is not. It's not going to collapse because they cannot pay for all the non-whites who do nothing. Well, they're just going to tax you more and more and more. And if they cannot pay for them, those non-white neighbors will turn to crime. Now he says, what's happening then is whites will be in their castle and the non-whites will roam around, and there won't be an anti-white regime to back them up, which is total wishful thinking. Now, this reminded me because in a previous space, we talked about Albrecht von Haller. And one of Albrecht von Haller, he contributed a lot to physiology. One of his ideas was that you must, the remedy that you want to use for a sick body, you must prove that it works by using the remedy on a healthy body without there being mixed in any side effects of the illness. And then you can ascertain what is the effect of this remedy on a healthy body, because if the remedy harms the healthy body, it's typically not going to be able to heal the body, because you have a sick body. Let's say it addresses the sickness, but it cannot get to a healthy body if you cannot keep a healthy body healthy with that remedy. And I thought about that when I thought about the the PA solution for waking whites up, because the PA solution is um, to go to white erased areas. So think about a healthy community. Um, let's say of Swedes, 100% white Sweden. In the PA method, but Sweden, they are not racially aware, okay, because they are white. So the PA solution is to wait until white erases them 90%. And then the 10% that's left, you can then get them to become racially aware. In other words, their solution has built-in defeat because it can't work on a healthy white nation. A healthy white nation must first white erase before it will realize that it shouldn't white erase. So totally defeatist strategy. Our strategy is the right one, because we recognize that it's not the difference, the similarities that makes us the same. It's the differences that make us different, which means we realize that that it's moral to want to be with people like you, with your values, your norms, and those norms are instinct. It's in your DNA. It's in your biospirit, and there's nothing wrong about that. To want to live with your own people, and those who say it's wrong is those people are anti-white, because they never have a problem when non-whites are together without white people. Um, yes, so that was the Marcolette, but definitely there's a desperation that set in when they realized, because previously in all of these communities, the easy answer was, all we need to do is all the Jews, we send them to Israel and all the problems go away. And then that deluge of TikTok videos hit. And none of them are so deluded that they could say, okay, but those TikTok videos are all Jews. Because um, there's just too many, and they are all of different races. Um, so so now the central hypothesis is now gone, because, and I think what is making people really upset is a lot of white people are anti-white, and that became clear with the Charlie Kirk situation. People realize this is not a problem with other races. This is a problem in all races. Anti-whiteism is in everyone, and now I can't trust my neighbor because my neighbor is one of those who made a video on TikTok. I just haven't seen it yet because there are so many. Um, I think let me just quickly have a look through. Yes, I think I covered all of them. But the central theme is basically we don't have a solution, but we are still going to attack your solution. We don't and they will even recognize that they don't have a solution. Um, um, and we are going to try this and try that, and we're going to hope for the best. But they'll still attack your solution as you know, that's bad, and you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and what's the outcome? The outcome is their solution, which is not a solution, and they recognize that. So this is um, I think that Charlie situation was an eye opener, and I think it's still filtering through And I think there's a lot of people who now are looking for answers again, because I think people are realizing that the answer that they thought they had is not an answer that reflects reality. And reality is anti-whiteism is inside everyone, because we all grew up in Western civilization, and we all have to deal with that. We have to deal with generations of our people who grew up with a lifetime of lived experiences, emotional lived experiences inside the anti-white narrative, where evil is white, and the contradiction, the real world contradiction, is the anomaly. So that's what I had, Julia.
Yeah, so I have two questions. One is I might have missed it because I was doing some things while listening, but who is claiming that this is a good solution or a solution? Steve Law? Is that who you said?
Who is claiming what is a good solution?
Um, that we can just wait until we're white erased enough and then hide away in enclaves and uh once people will reach a low enough point, they'll be racially aware, and then we can be safe in our enclaves.
That's Mark Collett. Um, that's Mark Collett. That, but I could hear that they were not, because they used words like try and let's hope for that, and that's, so they're clearly not convinced that that's going to work out well for them. But that this is sort of the best they can hope for. But that was Mark Collett. Yes, he says you wait until it's 10% white erased, or white erased still need only 10% white people, and those white people are now desperate because this is a war zone now. And then you take those white people, because what's happening is, as the neighborhood gets white erased, 70, let's say 10% non-whites come in, then there's a piece of your white population that moves away. Now that white population that moves away is not racially aware yet because they escaped. So only when you reach very low numbers, do you get, according to the PA hypothesis, only when you reach low numbers do you get white people that are receptive to their message. So the whites that moved off before that, those are lost to them because they just go to a new place where the cycle starts again. Yes, so that was their mechanism. Totally not going to work. And the other big thing that he misses is that the anti-white regime is not just going to fall apart. They're going to manage this whole thing. They're going to manage until there's no more white people left if we leave them to do what they do. So it's not just going to fall apart, and now we're in this Hollywood movie where it's every man for himself. It's not going to work like that. I mean, we've seen how it is in South Africa. Um, I I believe in the next 5 years, the electricity grid is going to collapse. We're going to, if you don't make your own power, you're not going to have power. Mm. I changed my whole household. We we cook our food on flames. We on charcoal. We're not using electricity as the primary energy source for cooking food. So that means if everything goes away, we can still eat. And I mean, this is it's not a solution, of course, not a long-term solution, but this is South Africa, and we are a bit further along down that road, and we're still nowhere close to what Mark Collett is thinking is going to happen. And it's like Jason says, when it gets to that point, when you have roaming bands of cannibal armies, then it's too late. If we haven't, if we're not a people by then, who knows what's going to happen then? But that's far too late. We need to get together before we get there. Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was yeah.
I definitely agree completely. It is a plan of just like wait and see. Basically, it sounds like that's not a plan. That's just as you said, desperation and lack of accountability. Very unmanly and unwestman-like to be like, let's just wait and see, rather than being active and actually doing things. And yeah, it won't change until, like you said, we change everyone's social morality, and that can't happen when certain pockets can remain sheltered from the effects of white erasure. The other question that I had was, when do you think anti-whiteism started? Like, is it something that has always been with us? Did it start with like this whole idea of the noble savage? Uh, where would you say that it, and when and how did it begin?
I cannot say when it did start, but how it started. If you look at what happened in the Anglo-Boer War, um, the British Parliament recognized the Transvaal Republic, but weeks after they recognized the Transvaal Republic as sovereign, Hans Merensky discovered the Merensky Reef, which was a rich gold reef in Johannesburg. And this was basically the cause for the Second Anglo-Boer War. So this is now Lord Alfred Milner was governor of the Cape. A lot of people in the British Parliament believed that time was on their side because Paul Kruger made the promise that the Outlanders will be able to vote in 10 years. And then, of course, the Outlanders are mostly English that came in from Britain. So then they can just vote Paul Kruger out, and then South Africa will become a colony of Britain. But Milner believed that time was against him because this gold will allow the Boer republics to create a standing army. And so he instigated the war. And now what happened before the war even broke out, was they started with anti-white propaganda to dehumanize the Boers, because they need to motivate their people to support the war, because this is a very unpopular war. The entire Europe, everyone sees what's going on. The the crown wants the gold. It was to the point where Queen Victoria cancelled a tour to Europe because they decided it's not going to be safe for her because of the negative sentiment on the continent, because of the war. Um, now you can see how the anti-whiteism works. It starts with selfish goals, and there are white people in that's in the way of their goal, and then they go on to this demonic anti-white propaganda to get their own people to make war on their own people. It is horrible. I mean, I go to these historical discussions. One of them, the son of a British member of parliament, he would have inherited a castle, an estate. He was the one, and he comes here and He's killed by a Boer sniper at 600 yards. He didn't even know what hit him. He comes all the way from England to die. Uh, you know, in another country, fighting for what he believed was his queen. But he was really just fighting for um, this ego and political, and there were political movements inside the British government. One of them was the Minister of War, Joseph Chamberlain. He wanted the war because he wanted to expose the British Army to a dangerous enemy so that he can motivate for all the reforms that he wanted. Because there was even a faction in British Parliament that wanted to bring back the redcoats. And the minister of, so you can see how these different um, powerful people in the regime have sometimes opposing goals, but they don't they don't have a problem with killing thousands of white people to get to their goals. Um, and Joseph Chamberlain was a white man, but he instigated the war that ended up killing 30,000 women and children. Yes, Julia.
So then, wouldn't anti-whiteism have always existed because there have always been selfish, greedy individualists willing to say to demonize other white people in order to accomplish their goals? It's just it hasn't really ever gotten to this point. Um, and it also makes me wonder to what extent this type of thing must exist within other races in order because they fight within themselves too and they must use similar types of tactics like this group of white people or sorry, black people, whatever, is bad because whatever reason, and is actually about resources as wars typically are. So yeah, I mean, is that ever anything? Uh, I mean, I guess it can be eradicated. This is kind of a question Stefan Molyneux asks, like, can we change permanently um, social morality? And I think he's right that the question is yes, and it has to be yes because like we did get rid of slavery. Um, it's how we have evolved. To a higher level as a civilization. Like if you consider integrals, psych, psychological method, which applies to both individuals and societies. So yeah, I think it can be gotten rid of, but it's going to be very, very difficult because it is something that we're always going to be fighting against unless we come up with some sort of crazy eugenics where we can eradicate uh, greed and selfishness. But I don't see a way of doing that that doesn't also hinder uh, the drive for greatness and just adventurousness, and it's such a fine line there between wanting to be great for your people or your family and just for yourself. So I don't know that we can eradicate in that sense, but I think that we can make our society much more aware of this type of thing and just make it unacceptable to behave in that type of manner to ever place greed above your people.
Yes, I think the big thing is if we never saw ourselves as a single people. And the other thing is, why do we not have um, um, the same? Because we have more. Um, we let so in other words, why do white people typically make more war against other white people than against non-whites? And I think it's because we never saw non-white nations as a real threat. Um, and this is why uh, inherently you always think of other white nations as the only threat to you, because the non-white nations, they just fold over. um, but the thing is fixed when we realize that we are a single people, and then all that goes away. Think of how difficult it's going to be when whites become get peoplehood. How difficult it's going to be for a nationalist leader to motivate making war on another nation that everyone sees as the same people. It's going to be very difficult. So I think that's um, I think that's the solution. Um, and yes, uh, that's the core. That's the core of the issue. I think once we become a people, it's going to be very hard to motivate, and it's going to be immoral. Something like the Minister of War, Joseph Chamberlain, um, to if that comes out that he had that intention, he would be ostracized. Um, but in Victorian England, that was, I mean, Victorian England had this ceremonious nature to the morality, where it's more about how it appeared than how it is. Um, if you compare, Joseph Chamberlain lied under oath, and um, that kind of thing for a Boer leader who believed he will go to hell if he does that, it shows you there is an aspect of inner morality that in Victorian England it was degraded. It was degraded to the point where um, um, I mean Tacitus, the Roman philosopher Tacitus, he talks about the same thing, where in a complex society and politics corrupts the people to the point where the German barbarian has more morals than the Roman senator. So this is a problem that I mean we need to address. I don't have an answer for that. But the first thing I think is just once we once we become a people, these immoral leaders, because we're stuck with them, it's going to take time to resolve those issues. But these immoral, selfish individualistic leaders won't be able to motivate the people to go and make war against their own nephews and nieces in other countries. And so that's I would say that's yes, Julia.
Those are really great points, and thank you so much for telling me all of that history, which I was not at all aware of or ever taught. So thank you. Um, I wonder if seeing if maybe the crux of the situation, and this will help not just with anti-whiteism, but with many other things, is demanding that morality truly be in real life, not just for appearances. That we not just appear moral, but that we be moral. That um, we care about, that we stay are true to our word again, as we used to be. Or there used to be your word was your vow, it was your reputation. If you I think this is something to do with tight knit communities, and being in a situation where you can't get away with behaving badly because other people will find out. Um, and it would be great if we didn't need to do that, if we could be self-policing. And I think we are moving in that direction as a people, or at least we have the potential to move in that direction, because we are so self-aware of morality in a way that other races aren't. So I'm hopeful in that regard. Uh, but making it something that everyone does, that will take more work. But maybe there is something positive that can come out of the increased technology, like of the surveillance state, in the sense that while I'm not at all a fan of losing privacy and things like that, um, if there's some way that we can get people to willingly live together and be more accountable to one another and want to live in tight knit communities, I think that would really benefit us, regardless of what kind of situation we live in, whether it's urban or suburban or rural.
I absolutely believe that because we are all sick people. And I realized that when I look back at my ancestors who preferred life in prison um, to signing a document that says they pledge allegiance to the Queen of England. The, that kind of person doesn't exist anymore. I cannot see myself. Um, it's like a different animal, but that existed and not long ago. So I'm convinced that when we remove this sick anti-whiteism, that the next generation is going to grow up better, and the next generation, and we, that biospiritual harmony, are going to recreate that people. Um, I'm convinced of that, and we are going to be a moral people again. I mean, the stories that my father told me about my grandfather and the kind of things that they did, these were people where character came from within. It was it and we'll I'm convinced we'll have that again. Um, and also that and this is an error that I don't want to make, because other people around me make that, and they um, some people that I know are quite degenerate, and they cannot fathom. They cannot. They think everyone is like them. So in a similar way, I can look back in time, and my own. I have my own perception of where I am in that, that social hierarchy. But I also know that I'm broken. I'm not the same that I would have been if I grew up in a healthy society. So the fact that I can't see myself as being that man who wouldn't give fealty. Um, I also recognize that I could have been that man if I grew up in a healthy society. So I absolutely believe we'll get back to that, and our descendants are going to look back at us and just shake their heads. Julia.
If it makes you feel any better, Hans, I can certainly relate in that. I don't know what I would do exactly in that situation. But whether I would go to jail or do something that goes against my deepest beliefs, I'm not sure what I would do. I'll be honest. I would hope that I would do the right thing, but I'm not sure that I would. Um, but I do know people, not very many, maybe three. But I do know some people whom I would bet my life would do the right thing, no matter what. Um, and so there are still some people like that who exist. But yes, they used to be a lot more common. Um, but I still think not not the norm, not the average, but certainly a lot more common. Um, and yeah, that will never go away. That will always be within us. And I even with everything that has gone on with anti-whiteism degrading us, or making us appear to be degraded, or making us sick, as you say, I still think that over time we have been making progress in our social morality in other ways, and I think that will, like, make a resurgence once we are well again and um, raised in a healthy morality. So I'm also very optimistic in that regard. And I'm gonna go to bed now, but this has been a great space. So thank you, Hans, and everyone else for being here.
Thanks, Julia. I'll take that as your final words. Thanks, everyone. This has been a great space. Let's hear what Biospirit has to say. Final words, Biospirit. Oh, Biospirit has no sound. Okay, so that's a wave. I'll take that as a all good. All right, so let's shut this down. This has been the Saturday edition of the Shade Tree White Wellbeing NWG Space. We meet here daily at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on X. We practice the Go Free lexicon and concepts as developed by Jason Kinner, Mr. No White Guilt himself. You can find him here on X as No White Guilt NWG, elsewhere as simply No White Guilt, and on the web at nowhiteguilt.org. I want to thank each and every one of the speakers and all of you who showed up to listen. You all make the space possible, bringing your diverse skills and intelligence here for all of us to share. Without all of your participation as speakers or listeners, it would just be my handsome self. Thanks again. I appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. I love you all and hope to see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.